Mhm. So welcome to join this webinar from Halborn, BSV Association, and AWS. So I'm Gabi. I'm the VP of Security at Halborn, and today we'll discuss how to bring blockchain to enterprise, focusing on infrastructure, interoperability, and security. So at Halborn, we work with many chains and protocols. And one thing is clear, the enterprise promise of blockchain only happens when scalability, security, and operational control all solved together. So that's the heart of today's talk. For the audience, you can drop your question in the chat during the webinar, and those will be answered at the end. With us, we are honored to be with first Siggy Oskarsson from BSV Association. So welcome, Siggy.
Hi, thank you, Gabi.
We have also here Jordan Kramsky from AWS.
Hi,
Hello,
Gabi.
Jordan.
Thanks for having me. Yep. Hi.
And we have also Oscar Oskarsson from BSV Association too.
That was a very nice pronunciation, Gabi.
Thank you. Thanks for joining, everyone. So let's start. I have a question for all of you guys. So why hasn't enterprise blockchain scaled until now? So what's the thing change in 2025 that makes that leap possible?
So maybe I should take that one first. I think the there's a lot of misconceptions about what blockchain is and what it can do, and there's been a lot of focus on the financial aspects of it, because there's native tokens in every blockchain, so there's a value that can be created there and a value exchange that can be had, well, let's just put it that there are disagreements about what is important to keep at a blockchain, to keep it decentralized, keep it secure, keep it safe, and how you should do that. And one of the things that we're trying to do at the BSV Association is to challenge that and challenge some of the choices that have been made over the last 15 years and look at the fundamentals of what we're actually doing. So from first principles thinking, looking at what are we actually doing with a blockchain? What are the things that are actually happening? Can we do them in a different way? And can we scale that up? And I think that different view of the whole thing is important. And that's a hard thing to do.
Maybe if I can add, from a non-technical perspective, being the least technical person in this room, so what you see is that within the blockchain industry, and I'm relatively new to the whole industry, I only haven't been here for like 18 months, we're very good at talking blockchain first rather than business first. So we're thinking of how blockchain can solve all these problems from a technical perspective. But I think the reality is also that sort of the initial idea of the disruptive blockchain, it's more, we need to think about integration. So we should actually be thinking business first, and how can blockchain add value to that business? So you see it now in Europe and the US with all these stablecoin regulations coming up. This is essentially the industry, the financial industry, showing their interest in this technology. But for them to actually adopt it, there's some hurdles to be passed, like regulation and consumer protection and data privacy and stuff like that. And once you see that happen, I think that's the first hurdle. And the fintech industry is now massive. Like if you look at the stablecoin industry, it's probably the trend of the year in blockchain, and hopefully the one that's going to give a boost to further use cases, because I think financial use cases is just the tip of the iceberg of everything blockchain can do. I'm happy to go into that later, but I also want to give other people the chance to talk.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I sort of echo the similar sentiment. It is, when we talk about enterprise applications, what is the core of what an enterprise is going to do with this? And I think a lot of what we've seen up until now is many different approaches done different ways with different mindsets or different mentalities or even philosophies to some degree, which is great because there's a lot of innovation in that regard. But at the same time, there's fragmentation. There's not sort of a normalcy across things that enterprises look for when they're trying to integrate. You know, to your point, Asger, they do need to integrate. So to the second part of the question, you know, what's different from before and today? I think that there have been, you know, more developments in regards to things like protocol gateways and things that help make things interoperate a little bit more. Those can introduce their own complexities. That's not to say that that is the end-all be-all solution to it, but I think that it's sort of normalizing in that regard, where enterprises are looking to it a little bit more. Some things have been tested, embedded, and they're starting to think, hey, what does this look like for our enterprise? What does it look like for our end users, for data, for finances, et cetera? So it's had a transition. It's matured a little bit to that end.
Yeah, so it's clear interoperability and scalability. If you are not able to be dominant on that, so I mean, you won't win in the next year and so on, because all protocols, if they are not managing scalability and interoperability, it's impossible to, you know, to move forward. So let's dive into the tech core. So in the infrastructure. So with BSV and AWS, we are talking about microservice architecture, which is Teranode, and parallel execution and this cloud native deployment. So please, Sigi, could you explain us how Teranode break past the usual blockchain limits?
Yeah, so like I said in the introduction, that we're trying to look at it from our first principles thinking, to looking at what is actually happening and breaking up the different areas, like you would in a complex application. Is going from a monolith to a microservices architecture. You break up the little pieces and you try to do things. And what we set out to do last year was to do a proof of concept. We did 1 million transactions a second through the architecture that we came up with. Now we managed to do that successfully together with AWS, with a lot of help from AWS actually, because I don't think this would have been possible 10 years ago, because you need a certain level of hardware, CPU, RAM, all these kind of things that come into play as well. But it's interesting, even at this level that we're with all the great hardware and the support that we have now, we were finding that we're running into limits at like 600,000-700,000. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. So we worked very closely together with AWS to change some of the stuff that we're doing, configure these microservices to actually be able to create something that is does 1 million transactions a second today, and hopefully will have no limits in the future.
Yeah, so it's this question now is for Jordan, and the thing is like from the AWS side. So how do you let blockchain infrastructure scale on demand and still fit regulated environments?
Yeah, so you know, one of the nice things, and I think my experience in working with the Teranode team and the BSV Association was really they put a lot of our different services through its paces, and they tried different services to identify, hey, does this work for us? Should we use this managed service? Should we use something else independently? And the nice thing about it is, you know, we like to take the shared responsibility model when it comes to security. So they could trust that the infrastructure that they're running on is properly managed and secured by AWS, which offloads a lot of that sort of considerations for them and allows them to experiment and sort of play. And for us, you know, providing various regions, and within a region, various compute and data capacity is kind of our bread and butter. We make the tools available for you to try and build and grow. And I think that the BSV Association and Teranode was a great example of that. They really tried a bunch of different approaches and really stretched things to their limits to find what worked for them, and were able to prove successful at the end without having to worry about provisioning hardware or managing data centers or any of the patching and sort of things that come with day-to-day operations. That's part of the managed services that we provide. So it was a great experience for me in that regard.
Maybe I can just add to that as well. I don't think we would have been successful without what Jordan is saying. because it was this flexibility that allowed us to test things out. This wasn't working. We get another server, and you know, at 1 million transactions a second, you're not talking about one server. You're talking about 100 servers, maybe per region. So, and we're running 6 regions. So we're talking about 600 servers. Oh, we want to change this to another, you know, instance type. You're not talking about one server. You're talking about 240 servers that you need to change. No, it's not. That's an exaggeration. Maybe 100 servers that you need to change on one service. Overall across all these regions, and they were very flexible and accommodating in that.
Yeah. So from our security point of view, I mean, scaling isn't neutral. So issues like flooding or consensus stress or this node isolation so appear in our latest top 100 DeFi hack report. We can say over half of losses come from off-chain attacks and not the core chain issues. So that's, I mean, that matters to the companies for sure. So, question for all of you: how can organizations balance this high performance with a strong operational and security guarantees?
And maybe I can start with that one to some degree. I mean, I think you take the sort of defense in depth model that you apply to security, and I think a similar consideration can be applied to other operational requirements, right? So it's not just making sure that you have the layers of security applied. You can also apply that to things like throughput and operational optimizations, right? So using kind of the right tool for the job and make sure that you're scoping the performance relative to what the responsibility is for that service, and scaling around that as well, right? It's I think one of the nice things that Terno sort of introduced and that you see in microservices is it's not a monolith. You don't have to scale everything out. You scale what requires the scaling. And so I think approaching it from a layered perspective, the same way you do with security, has kind of the same impact, both operationally as well as kind of throughput and performance.
Yeah, and I think maybe to add to that, so at the end of it, going to a lot of conferences, basically one of the buzzwords this year you hear is DORA, right? The operational resilience, right? And at the end of the day, I think an enterprise, it doesn't really matter for them how the blockchain itself works. Like it should just be given, but then the blockchain that they select should be able to handle its scale and security, should be able to offer that. Because think of it from a business resilience perspective as well, like the scalability itself. It's not just something fun or nice that you want to do, like, yay, we did 1 million TPS. No, it's actually showing your business can grow and you won't get into any network congestion. You won't get into any increased fees, or like your business is more stable and I think therefore also more resilient. So what you see now with big businesses having to comply to DORA, and hopefully by educating them more around blockchains and in general, we can see again also this move that blockchains can be incorporated more into enterprises. Again, frameworks being in place that also require blockchains to think about, hey, okay, so how should we frame and position this, and what are the key areas we should be focusing on? Right?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I'd
I
like to
mean,
add one thing is that, so the way that I always look at the blockchain is that it's secure from the inside out instead from the outside in, because it's a digital signatures in a transaction that start everything, and then you have the proof of work, and so the blockchain is almost inherently secure. And that's what we're focusing a lot on, and that's what we're very happy to be able to integrate into the AWS services, where they took care of for all the network security, the firewalling, all that stuff that you have around that, made that kind of we didn't have to think about that anymore. That was just all there. But when you merge these two things together, the security on that and the infrastructure end, and you have that security from the inside out, you're trying to get both. You have security from inside out, and you have from outside in. And then you can create really resilient networks of data networks of a blockchain like that's scalable.
yeah,
I think one other interesting thing in thinking about it, right, like operationally, observability is a very important thing. And I think one of the considerations at scale is we're now talking about, you know, if we're talking security inside out, the scope and visibility that you kind of need to have changes. It changes the perspective a little bit. And that to me is also one of the key components of like operational excellence is good visibility and good management of things like that. So it's interesting to me to think about what this looks like at scale, right? It's one thing to have your infrastructure at scale, but now we're talking a scalable blockchain. What does that look like from a visibility, observability sort of perspective?
Yeah. And also the other side of scalability is modularity. So firms need blockchain to link with their own system, data, payments, identities. So Jordan, how does cloud modularity let you build secure, flexible blockchain parts?
I think one of the nice benefits of the cloud is it's a big toolbox, right? So depending on what it is that you're looking to build, you take the right tool for the job and you apply it appropriately. And a big part of that as well, in speaking about modularity, comes down to how do you choose to deploy your resources? Are you using something like infrastructure as code? Or are you using something like ClickOps? I know that the Terranode team was using infrastructure as code, so they were very controlled, managed deployments of their resources, and easily able to build or remove modules that would help them with what they were trying to do as they were exploring things. So the modularity that comes natively within AWS or cloud providers fits very well for a system like Terranode, for example, where you have different modules and different things that you need to scale and deploy, be it the data plane or the actual compute layer that's handling it, or even the network layer for that matter. Part of the consideration around doing this across multiple regions is the interconnect and making sure that it was performant between different regions and different network approaches and things like that. So I think it's really just a matter of applying the right tools for what it is that you're trying to do. And AWS has a bunch of them. You use what you need, you don't use what you don't, and you're able to sort of build and grow efficiently.
Yeah. And see what role do SPV wallets and overlay services play, and how do clients get them through AWS Marketplace?
Well, the original design of the first blockchain, Bitcoin, is in the white paper, chapter 8 of the white paper, talk about SPV, simple payment verification, and it's built into the protocol. There's all this cryptographic proof. There's not just the digital signature, but all the hashing that happens, the Merkle trees. Don't want to go into too much detail, but it allows us to, without having to run our own node, allows us to prove that our transaction was included into a block. And so there's cryptographic proof for all of this stuff. And why is that important? That's important because when you're running a network at 1 million transactions a second, you do not want to have a copy of that network at your home, because we're doing 10 gigabits of network traffic, and we're during the 2 weeks that we tested, we're storing 1.5 petabyte of data. So there's all kind of considerations that we can do, but the question is, what do you want to do? I actually just want to make sure that my payment to Ausker for the lunch we had the other day goes through and it's there. I actually don't really care. He cares. I make this payment. He wants to see, so he needs to have proof that it's been included on the blockchain and the payment is okay. That's where that comes in. So what we are very much preparing is the new world where we have scalable blockchain. We're doing a lot of transactions a second, and we make it as easy as possible for all the users, whether it's a private person doing a simple payment or it's a enterprise that is doing some auditing, trail, whatever that might be, smart contracts, that you don't want to go to a layer 2, because you kind of just create the double spend problem, because what the blockchain is trying to solve, this double spend problem, you just make that worse. But an overlay, you could look at that as it's like a small piece of the whole picture. So you have a filtered view of the blockchain, but because of all the cryptography that's already in there, all the hashing and the digital signature, you can be absolutely sure that is the correct view and all that stuff. And so it's a way of allowing people to be participants on the network without actually having to be a node operator with this huge amount of hardware that's needed to do that. So it's an extremely important part of the scaling of the whole thing. And going to AWS, so So what you do, we have an open source program on our side when we're developing tools for all this stuff, and so you can run something called an SPV wallet that does, has a lot of this stuff built in, or you can run your own stack of things or an overlay stack, and all these things should be one-click install from the AWS marketplace to make it very, very easy for you to interact with the network. And so that's where we're moving towards and working very hard on making that a reality.
I think that
Maybe I
also.
can.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Esther, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Cheers. No, I just want to say, like, as part of our program that's run by Siggy and his team, essentially what we want to do is, because the new software will essentially potentially support so much transactions per second, you also need to think from a business perspective. So I don't care about all these transactions. I only care about mine. And that's exactly where the point comes in, right? Why you actually need sort of this SPV view, where you only care about your own transaction. You don't care about any of the rest. You just want to make sure your transaction are chain. So what we're doing is essentially trying to make it easier for anyone to build on BSV. So we as the association are building out libraries, we're building out reference implementations for people to then integrate into their businesses, which will be ready for that scale. So anyone can obviously already build on BSV, but if you would use these new components that are currently being developed and being published, that actually guarantees that your business will be ready when scaling, right? When the network really has traction and a lot of transactions on chain. Jordan, all yours.
I mean, I was effectively the same thing. The business opportunities that it represents, right? The fact that the overlays can add sort of this opinionated data or aggregate this information from this blockchain sort of source of truth introduces all kinds of new business opportunities. So speaking to the modularity component of this, right? Depending on what your business does, you can provide be part of an overlay network that's tracking this relevant information for your business, which introduces all kinds of new business use cases, which I think is one of the exciting things if we think about, marketplace accessibility and things like that. A sort of a drop-in solution where you can point and aggregate these UTXOs and the information that you care about as a business offers a new layer of data integrity and data handling, and it's going to interoperate with a number of other AWS services. All of our data services, et cetera, can be used with that overlay functionality, which to me is very exciting because it opens things up to all kinds of new businesses or extends existing businesses with a new data source that has its own provenance and that sort of thing.
Just one last point about that, though, because following up on what Jordan is saying, is that it can add privacy to the whole thing as well. Because if you have data, you have some kind of data has personally identifiable information, you do not want to put that on chain. Actually, that's not allowed in, I think, the European Union, at least, and in some other countries as well. So, but you can actually, you can have that data packet go into an overlay, has that data packet, put that onto chain. So now you have the provenance, you have actually proof that it was done at that time, that it hasn't been meddled with or anything like that. But you're actually, the personally identifiable information is secure in your own infrastructure and at AWS in a private overlay. So you have best of both worlds. So.
Yeah, so for the audience, don't forget that you can post the questions in the chat whenever you want. So we are seeing now like a lot of enterprise pieces involve custody, settlement, data, and they must interoperate over blockchain. So this question is for all of you. What challenges appear with this happen?
I can jump on it first. Yeah, go ahead, Esther. Yeah, what kind of
No, I think interoperability. You should ask yourself why they're asking for interoperability, right? So at the end of the day, it's also like avoiding lock-in into specific technology or specific infrastructure or whatever. So it makes a lot of sense. But if you then look at the details of, for example, an enterprise working with blockchain X and then moving on to blockchain Y, and you see a lot of initiatives of cross-chain interoperability, bridges are coming along and stuff like that. But also the characteristics of each blockchain are so different, it becomes very, very challenging. And I think it's a good challenge that the industry is posing to the blockchain industry. because it's a challenge that is worth addressing. I'm not sure if we have all the answers yet on how all these blockchains are supposed to interoperate, but it's a challenge accepted, I would say, as an industry. Yeah.
Yeah, this classic interoperability risk now appears.
Well, and I think
Yeah, go
a
ahead.
big thing that comes with the data interoperability, if we're talking, for example, data, a lot of times you need schemas for what this data looks like, right? And if we have multiple chains and multiple systems that we're trying to interoperate across, that requires its own sort of level of governance or commonality on, how are we defining this data and how it looks, or identity, or even sort of financial transactions that might be taking place. So I think, one of the big challenges that enterprises are going to face is kind of this fragmented sort of approach to bring it all together. And, there have been advancements in things like protocol gateways and bridges and things like that, which are really closing that gap. But they can also introduce other challenges, security considerations primarily.
So let me take a bit of a contrarian view here. I don't think we should be doing this. I don't think we should be trying to make all these blockchains interoperable. And I'll tell you, I'm being a little bit black and white now. But what is the business problem you're trying to solve? I think a lot of the things that we've been doing in blockchain over the last 10 years, maybe, I think this one, 15, 16, when Ethereum came onto them. A lot of it has been financially driven. A lot of it has to do with the value of the tokens of the blockchains and the coins and all this stuff that were created. Yes, if you want to have a sushi coin and you want to turn that into Ethereum and you want that, maybe you need some interoperability between all these blockchains. But if you're a private enterprise and you want to secure your data, or you want to make sure we have a very interesting use cases on companies that are working with us that are actually securing data online. So basically just putting a hash on chain that has influences on the insurance premiums, because they're actually able to prove certain things. Now, that's a fantastic use case. Do you really care what blockchain that is going on? Or does it just matter that the hash is there and you can prove that it was, you put it 3 months ago and the data is still the same? And I think the future game is going to be much more interesting in these overlay services. And an overlay service, maybe that's the interoperability layer, could be talking to multiple blockchains. That's fine. And you take care of it on a different level. So you don't need the blockchain itself to be doing these things, but the overlay needs to do that. But I'm also of the opinion that these base layer, the blockchain, it's already really, really difficult. It's really difficult to get your head around. There's not a lot of people that understand it, and we need to keep it as simple as possible. So the more features you add to that thing, the more chances you have of having bugs, problems, security issues, and all these things. So my little bit contrarian opinion now is that we should keep the base layer as simple as possible, build the thing into overlays, and if you do want interoperability, do it in the application layer. And you have to make sure what you're trying to solve as a business. What is your business problem that you're trying to solve? Don't start with blockchain, start with your business problem and then go to a blockchain.
I wouldn't have expected anything else than a contrarian opinion from you, Siggy. So, but no, I think, Gabi, it's also a bit of your passion, right? At the end of the day, what it will lead to is standards being defined, right? So there's certain industries that will require certain standards that are currently already being developed for blockchain and on blockchain. So I think that's, at the end of the day, blockchain application adhering to standards. And these standards there are currently some already in place, and there will be many more in the future.
Yeah, and interoperability is quite interesting for attackers. So from a security perspective, before there were bridges, and now the more blockchains are trying to interoperability, the more risk. And attackers and bad hackers, they love that. So now let's move to from infrastructure to real use. So which cases are these architectures unlocking? So this question is for Ausge. So which Teranode use cases are most active? Tokenized assets or high load systems, regulated markets?
Theoretically, any use case. because it's not about one use case that requires this many. Like even if you look at the Digital Pound Foundation, they were asking, I think, in their tender about being able to support 250,000 transactions per second. So even a digital pound is not going to need the full capacity of such a scalable blockchain. But it's about, then again, having the guarantee that your business will be able to run reliably and you won't get into any congestion problems. Like we have projects that are approaching us because they're exactly for that reason. They have been experimenting with other blockchains, and on the happy path, everything goes well. And then their business grows, and then they get stuck into higher fees or network congestion, and they end up having these issues. So short answer, anyone. But would like to emphasize a couple. Like the biggest trend, like I said, this year is absolutely stable coins. And I think also like the origin of Bitcoin was peer-to-peer cash. So it's quite nice and logical that the first sort of killer use case for blockchain is a financial one. The second one I'd like to highlight is traceability. We have in the Europe digital product passports coming along as a new regulation, where at the end of the day, it's about consumers knowing where their products that they're buying are coming from. That regulation will kick in 2030. So there's a lot of traction now already in smaller startups. Within our ecosystem, we have a couple of great companies that are working in that, within the dairy industry, within farming, and within shipping logistics in the port. There's really cool use cases there, and I think that one will really grow. It's partially regulatory driven, and now it's about unlocking also consumer value, because just to put it on there because it's mandated by regulations doesn't seem to really add value to the consumers, but I think it can also unlock a lot of value for the consumers as well, if you would introduce those kinds of things, really knowing, having more control, but getting back to the origin of blockchain, like users having more control and empowering them, that they actually know where their stuff's coming from. So I also want to leave the floor to Jordan and Siggy, but just want to highlight those two use cases because there's so many more. And essentially, like I said at the beginning, finance is just the tip of the iceberg, and digital product passports, traceability is the next trend coming up, and who knows what's going to be next. Like it's any place where data integrity has a role to play, or trust has a role to play. Blockchain has a role to play for me.
Yeah, and Jordan, from your perspective, like how does AWS is able to meet the needs of these regulated sectors, controls, audit trails, and scaling?
Yeah. So I think, fortunately for AWS, the same services that we provide for regulated sectors and regulated customers are also available for non-regulated customers. So, we put a lot of emphasis on security and governance, making sure that we have services available for things like audit trails of API activities. We have, a security hub that's aggregating security details. We have services around compliance where it makes compliance and audits much easier because it aggregates data across a number of our different services. And even services like AWS Config, which allows you to sort of track, configuration standards and requirements that you set in your environment and drift from those sorts of things. So really, we try to provide all the tooling that's needed to speak to these regulated sectors. Again, this goes back kind of to the shared security model, whereby Amazon is providing a lot of those underlying fundamental security requirements. And, we like to say that we provide the security of the cloud and you provide security in the cloud, right? So you need to be also participating in the security requirements, and we give you the tooling to do so. And that's something that's available for all of our customers.
Yeah, so now we'll close by looking forward. So 2025 is a mature year for many projects. So yet challenges remain. So we see changes in threat modeling, due diligence checks, higher demand for security embedded from the start. So this question is for the panel, as well as our institutional clients ask first for security by design, technical protection, but also, as you mentioned, Jordan, auditability, continuity, and this compliance. But regarding last question for you, what should companies do today to make sure their blockchain strategy is future proof in security, performance, and we can say resilience?
It's a very short answer.
No, well, maybe not short. I think let's be contrarian a little bit again. I don't think a company should have a blockchain strategy. I think they should have a business strategy, and then you have to look at how that blockchain fits into that whole aspect, and then they need to evaluate about what the requirements are of there. And if any company, startups need to be able to grow, big companies have a lot of volume, so you need to think about scalability and cost. So there's always these aspects that you have to look at. But maybe we said this before, but I wanted to say it again. Focus on your business first and see how blockchain fits in, and don't have a blockchain strategy. It's not that contrarian, was it us?
I would almost say we were brothers, because I was going to say the same thing. Like it's no, it really is the case, right? So at the end of the day, 10 years ago, during the first hypes, all of a sudden, all these big companies had a head of blockchain. Now all of these companies have a head of blockchain and AI. Like they were just following the hype. And I think it's good if big companies are looking at innovative solutions, because that's also how they can move their business forward. If it's like Siggy said, they should think of their business first. Like if blockchain can add a value to them, be it in the back end or just an underlying infrastructure or settlement layer, at the end of the day, it's a distributed ledger. It's a decentralized IOUs, right? And you can use it for any use case. And if the bigger the company or the more important, you need more resilience, therefore more scalability, more security from your blockchain that you'll be implementing. But they don't need a blockchain strategy. They need to think of their business models. And I think that's where a blockchain strategist could come in. If these people are well educated on really the possibilities of blockchain, they could actually come up with new business models. And then you can have sort of a transformation officer, where blockchain is just one of many emerging technologies which they could be integrating into their business. But it should always be business first, and coming up with, how can I ensure that my costs, if integrating a blockchain, are stable, that it can scale, therefore my business is more resilient, that it has high security, etc. And that's where we at the association, under Siggy's technical lead, are focusing a lot on these three, at least the security and the scale. Yeah.
I would +1 these things. I would say, define your axioms. You don't need to boil the ocean, but you need to stick to what your core business value is. And I think you see kind of a lot of the similar thing with AI very recently. AI gets kind of like tagged onto things, and it's like, okay, what business value are we truly providing as part of this? I also think there's probably going to be a cultural shift that's going to happen, similar to what we're seeing with AI. And so I think businesses should be mindful of that, in the same way that, ultimately a business is a service for people, and it's people interactions and providing goods and services to people. And I think being aware of that is certainly important. And then I think the other sort of thing, often when we talk like DevSecOps, we talk about moving security left, right? You want to move it earlier in the life cycle of development and things like that. And I kind of like to think about moving security down and making it a little bit more foundational, that everything goes across, and it's not just the development lifecycle. There are security considerations that everyone needs to be mindful of, and we're again starting to see this with Gen AI, right? With how people are interacting with these new systems. It's not just developers, it's everyday people and their interactions. And so this is a new service and a new opportunity, and you need to stick to that core business value and not just jump on some type of bandwagon, or have blockchain because of blockchain. It's really, what does it surface for people? What does it improve? How does it make lives better? And I think that's really the long-term consideration.
Yeah, my contribution here is like security by design. I consider like essential. Maybe we are the Grinch in blockchain, always thinking about security risk, attacker, and whatever. But I think it's something essential for the for the future.
I'd like to add one thing, if I may, Gabi. Just because I think we still have time. And I think one thing I'd like to emphasize is education. I mentioned it briefly, but it's, do people really understand what blockchain is and what it can do? Or has it been around for 15 years and essentially people think it's a speculative asset that they can get rich quickly? Or do they actually understand what the power of this technology is? Because I think for 90% of the people, it's going to be the first case, if not 95, if not even 99, let's be honest. Because when I tell people I work in blockchain, they think I'm rich and don't care about the society and just want to get rich quickly. But then I have to explain, no, it's the utility of blockchain. It's actually this super amazing technology that really can change the world, essentially. And then people get it. But to reach that, to get the business leaders to understand that, I think there's still a lot of work to be done from the entire industry to educate on really what blockchain is, what it can do, and that it really adds value to the business. So I just wanted to finish with that one.
No, then
Yeah,
I'm going to add
super
one
good
thing
point.
to that as well, if I allow Gabby. No, because so what I think, if you look at all the things that are possible with blockchain, I don't think we even started scratching the surface. All these financial things are like the low-hanging fruit, the easy stuff. But how do you integrate it into businesses, into accounting, into supply chain? We talked about a lot of these things, but actually what we really need to do, but this is like a 10, 15, 20-year plan, we have to start building systems from the ground up to you really utilize this technology, because they will be cheaper, faster, and better because of that security that's built into every single transactions or every action that you would do. If every action is a blockchain action, you don't need to have 3 copies, backups, all that stuff. It's there. So you can build. So we start building accounting system, banking systems, supply management systems from the ground up, instead of just anchoring something to the blockchain. We can make those things much more efficient, and we haven't started scratching the surface on that one.
Yeah, definitely. So let's pick a couple of questions for the chat. So the first one is for you, Sigi. You mentioned overlay networks being able to have private subsets of the blockchain. So how is this reflected on the public blockchain then? So a hash on the private data?
Possibly, yes. There's many ways of doing this. Just hashing the data and putting it on there, and then link and in your overlay, which is basically just your private database, right? You link back to that thing, and then you can prove there's a provable relationship there. You can even use in court and legally speaking. But you can also do other things. You can also tokenize things. So if you have something that has a couple of steps, like a process flow or anything like that, and we're looking at a couple of applications like that, you can create small tokens that go from step 1 to step 10 and then get destroyed. And now that is not only visible, you can prove that all that happened in the exact order. It cannot happen in another order, so the order is actually intrinsic into what you do in the blockchain. You can do so many more things. So putting a hash is the simplest one, and we're working with a lot of customers to do that because it's a simple use case, but there's so much more that we can do as well. But it does decouple the private data from the public blockchain. That's the most important thing.
Maybe if I can add to that one, not from a technical perspective, but at the end of the day, it's also about, then if you're thinking from a business perspective, it's about costs. Like, do you want to have all your data on chain, or does it suffice for your business model if you have just the proof of it on chain, right? Which is the hash itself, which automatically then comes with a lower cost for your business, right? So it goes both ways, technical and a business perspective. It needs to be a business decision what makes most sense for your company. But that, with the way Sigi explained it, is anything's possible, essentially.
Okay, so let's pick another question for the chat. Wolfgang one, is there any guidance example projects that show the best practice of applications for using the scalability abilities of Terranode? Who wanna pick that one? Sigi?
No, not yet. But I don't think I don't think you have to worry about that too much, about the scalability abilities. I mean, this is just, you're doing something. You can just do a lot more of it now, and you don't have to worry about the price going up. So I think it's the question behind the question is, is there, if I may, because I know Wolfgang, but is there a thing that we're not doing today because we think blockchains are not scalable that we should be doing or could be doing? So, for instance, CertiHash is a company that's on our chain that take log files and things that are happening in as this is security related on servers are creating log files, and they every second or something like that they create a hash of a log file, put them on chain, so they immediately know and they have proof that these log files have been changed or not. On a non-scalable blockchain, you don't want to go out to the market and sell that product to 10,000 clients because you'd be stuck. On ours, it's not a problem. So it's a new product that you wouldn't have thinking about doing on BTC or Ethereum. And related to that as well, what you could also do every time somebody logs on to a server, you log that and put that hash onto chain to really create provenance, or you create a token when they log on, and when they log off, you destroy the token. You create proof, like anything like that. These are just stupid examples, but these are things that if you don't have a scalable blockchain, you wouldn't even think that this is possible. So maybe that's a thing there. So we should start thinking, what can we use this for to improve the world? And we do have a scalable blockchain, so don't worry about it getting a lot of users.
Maybe to add another example, I also know Wolfgang, so hi to Frankfurt, I think it is. If you think of, again, coming back to emerging technologies, there's this Internet of Things, right? All these sensors that will have an identity, and they will be sending data, and you need to verify that data. They need to share that data. So that is one of the things that Siggy said that hasn't been properly unlocked yet. And once that one, they will definitely need to be able to scale up as well. There's a couple of companies in our ecosystem that do that. Let me finish this one and then I'll go to your next question, Wolfgang. That's just right. In vineyards, for example, in Virginia, we're logging everything, or that company is logging all the data from these devices on chain, again, to get it coupled to insurance to reduce the premium in case of a disaster scenario. So now going back to Wolfgang's question, is how do we build applications that are designed to be ready? That's Siggy, that's one for you. That's exactly the open source tech stack, right?
Well, yeah, so the SPV, right? So we're building a whole stack of open source tools that will have included these overlays we're talking about, the SPV proofs and all that stuff. That's something that we don't have time to go into now, but we are building tools on top of Terranode to do all this, because that's and try to make it as easy as possible. There was a hackathon a couple of weeks ago, which is I think this is a good anecdote. And the developer that actually won the hackathon, he just didn't know about BSV and learned all this stuff in the car towards the hackathon, and then in a weekend created something that was very useful and he kicked ass. I thought that was a great story. That's what we're trying to do, make it super easy with the tools, and we'll definitely be communicating more about that in the coming months.
And maybe to give Jordan a plug as well, we are looking to get it integrated into sort of the one-click marketplace of AWS, right? We're working on that together with them. Yeah.
Okay, so unfortunately, we don't have more time for more questions. So we will try to answer all of them in the other platforms. So anywhere that people can follow you guys and your companies for updates. I mean, AWS is pretty obvious, but but for Siggy, Oscar.
I don't do Twitter or X, as you call it, so I'm more active on LinkedIn, but we'll have a new website coming out soon for the association, and then we'll become more clear. But most active on LinkedIn and can reach me there. Yeah.
Okay, so we will.
Yeah, I'm actually quite active on LinkedIn, on X, but not posting a lot, mainly reading. So I am there, but I'm not. I'm trying to keep right. And there's just a lot of too much to do. So I would say go into our communities. We have a Discord community with lots of groups, and I'm also monitoring that. There's some questions around stuff that I can answer, but for people that are looking for really technical stuff, I'd suggest the Discord community for now.
Okay, and we will post also our top 100 DeFi hacks report 2025. So this conversation was really fast, so that's a good sign. So thank you, Jordan, Siggy, Oscar. I mean, thanks everyone for joining. It was a really valuable conversation. Thanks a lot for your collaboration and for participating in this webinar.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Gabi.
Thank
See you
you.
soon in Madrid.
Thanks, Gabi.
Okay, so for everyone, I'm Gabi Urrutia, VP of Security at Halborn. See you next time. As we always say, stay safe, stay smart, and keep building.